Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Mayhem or Margin, Generate Services Revenue Gains, brought to you by Technology Services Industry Association and sponsored by Managed Maintenance. My name is Ingen Triago, your moderator for today. Before we get started, we just have a few housekeeping items. Audio is routed through your computer speakers. If you encounter audio quality or technical issues, let us know right away via the questions panel. You may access full screen view via the toggle button located at the top right area of the console. We do encourage you to ask questions at any time via the questions panel. If you don't get to your question today, we will follow up with you via email. And finally, a link to the recording of today's webinar and the PDF of the presentation will be sent out in the next 24 hours via email. Once again, thank you for taking the time to join us today. I would now like to introduce our presenters today. John Ragsdale, VP Research, Technology, and Social for TSIA, and Tina Lux-Boyne, President and CEO for Managed Maintenance. We do have a lot of exciting content to share in the next 30 minutes, so let's go ahead and get started by turning things over to our first presenter. John, over to you.
Thank you, Inga. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We've got a really interesting topic today, and we're focusing on service revenue generation and how to keep that service revenue climbing. I have some data here from our Service 50. If you're not familiar with this, it was a study that we first kicked off back in 2008 that looks at the incoming revenues from the 50 largest global technology companies. And as TSIA has been saying, service revenue is overtaking product revenue. And as you can see over the last couple of years, product revenues due to various moves to the cloud and a lot of consolidation in the industry and some commoditization around certain product categories, product revenue is flat or declining, while service revenue is climbing and taking a larger and larger percentage of total technology revenue. You know, and as a result, we're hearing company executives and even Wall Street talking about service revenue, often for the very first time. And many of our members are service executives who have a very long history coming from a cost center world. They're very surprised to find that they're suddenly on the hook, not only to equal the revenue that they generated last year, but finding new and creative ways to generate more service revenue. They're on the hook for a number, often for the first time. So as a result, we're seeing a massive shift from the traditional, very tactical, somewhat reactive support organization into a customer success initiative, which is much more strategic, more far-reaching, and I would say much more proactive in real time than we have been in the past. So last fall, TSIA announced a new focus around customer success. We surveyed our members around customer success programs and initiatives that they had started, and we found that companies with a customer success program tend to fall into three main focus areas. We have those that are focused primarily on adoption. This is making sure that the customers are using, getting the value out of the products, and they can't do that if they're not adopting them and consuming them. We have companies focusing on retention. These are the ones that are worried about, are you going to renew, which is incredibly important in a subscription economy in the cloud, as well as for your on-premise tools with their annual maintenance renewals. So the retention folks are looking at profiles and models to determine how likely companies are in renewing their agreement with you, if there are any red flags that we need to fix before the renewal period comes, etc. And some of the most forward-looking companies are now treating customer success as a sales expansion play. How can we do upsell and cross-sell as a part of our service interactions to gather more wallet share from our customers moving forward? So I think that it's helpful in understanding the importance of customer success and the role that service plays in this new service revenue economy by looking at the four phases of the customer lifecycle. And I'm borrowing this from a report my boss, Thomas Law, TSIA's executive director, recently published, where he compared the internal-facing lifecycle with the external-facing lifecycle. So the internal-facing lifecycle is something we're all familiar with, the standard sales-centric view of the customer: land, adopt, renew, and expand. But if we look at these same four cycle steps from the customer's perspective, you begin to understand the role that services can play. After they've explored possible solutions, they've adopted a technology, this is where customer success really begins to enter into the picture. So helping customers assess how effective has this initiative been? What sort of ROI have they received? Very often you have to help the customers calculate the ROI because they don't know how. So helping them understand what the key performance indicators are, helping them know that if they adopt certain features, certain modules, that they will get more and more results from that implementation. And finally, the realize piece. And instead of just how do we expand sell, from a customer standpoint, they're saying, hey, we got some real business benefit. We saved hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in productivity or salary costs or whatever due to the tools. Now, how can we funnel that into additional investments to have an even better performance next year? So the customer success role is becoming really, really critical, particularly to the assess and the realize portions, to help customers understand the value that they've received and help them understand how they can invest even further to get a better payback next year. So also from that document, Thomas Law outlined all of what we call the capabilities. Capabilities are strengths or skills or education. It's things that you have to be good at in order to succeed. And he defined all of these different capabilities that companies need to have to successfully meet the needs of customers and deliver that engagement life cycle. And today I wanted to drill down into two of these boxes, specifically customer analytics and contract analytics. We have found that many companies, even some of the largest companies, have been running their entire contract and renewal process on spreadsheets. And, you know, the challenge is that typically renewals come up, you find out that the customer is not happy, the renewal is in trouble, and it's a little late to do anything about it. And what we're looking at today is how we can take automation and analytics and become much more informed, more proactive about understanding what's going on with these customer relationships. How likely are they to renew? Is there a challenge coming up that we could attack and take care of before we get to that renewal period? So understanding much more about how customers behave and some analytics and dashboards about automating that renewal cycle. So we surveyed our members to find out how many applications or various sources of data they have around customers, customer history, contract entitlement information, and we found that companies on average are accessing a dozen or more different applications to get at this information. Whether because of mergers and acquisitions or because they brought in new technology and didn't end of life the old tools, we got a lot of old tools and siloed information, making it very, very difficult to not only find what you need, but to effectively analyze all of that data. So I have some information here from last year's technology survey. The new survey will be coming out in March, so stay tuned for more details on that. We see that 17% of companies have budget for investment in upsell, cross-sell tools. And I think with the focus on sales expansion that we're going to see that number going up a lot in the 2015 survey. Recurring revenue management. A third of companies have budget for tools to automate the renewals process, create dashboards for renewals, etc. So it's great to see that people are investing in that critical technology. And nearly half of companies have budget for new tools around contract and entitlement management. And this is such a critical area, not only to know how to deliver the right level of service the customer is paid for, but understanding, you know, which contracts are up for renewal, any key milestones in the relationship that may impact that renewal, etc. So glad to see that there's a lot of pent-up demand for these tools because, as we're going to hear from our guest speaker today, automation and analytics is a real key to success in this area. So finally, you know, I want to reiterate, TSIA strongly believes that 2015 is the year of customer success. our inquiries and our interests around automating renewals, driving adoption, expand selling are up. We've got some new announcements we'll be making around expand selling at our spring conference, so stay tuned for that. And extreme automation is absolutely required. When you look at the number of data sources there, you simply can't rely on people knowing where to look to find the information. And I have some data here around the current renewal rate. 78% is the average renewal rate. 20% of those renewing contracts require an additional discount. So, these are good numbers. They're not great numbers. And the pace setters definitely have much higher numbers. So investing in intelligent analytics and dashboards is a critical component to boost those renewal rates and lower those discount rates. So I hope that's a good opening, kind of setting the stage for our topic today. And I'd like to turn things over now to our guest speaker, a TSIA partner and also a member of the TSIA Partner Advisory Board. So Tina Lex-Bowen, I'm going to turn things over to you. Take it away.
Thanks, John. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody on the call. For those of you in the Northeast, I hope you're staying relatively warm. I'm going to review, just to kind of set the stage, not all the facts on the screen you see in front of you, but just a handful of these facts to give you the backbone of an annuity business and why customer and contract analytics are so critical to your business and how automation can bring that together along with proactive actions and actionable data down to your end user customers. So one of the items I want to review is that companies who are growing their recurring revenue are growing 20% faster and enjoying 25% higher profit margins. That's the wave of the future. Moving away from the commodity business into your recurring revenue is what's going to keep you healthy and bring value to your shareholders and your investors. You have a stream that can be looked out 3 to 5 years. Recurring revenue accounts for 30 to 40% of revenue, but 50% of profits. So it's a lot cheaper to deliver, certainly once you put automation behind it, which we're going to look at here in just a few moments as to why and what that opportunity looks like, and frankly, what challenges are presented with that opportunity. Poor data quality, primary reason that 40% of the business initiatives fail. So as John mentioned earlier, a lot of companies, while the intent is to move to automation and analytics, they're still managing their business or their asset base on spreadsheets and rudimentary tools, and that is something that the market is demanding changes, both at the level of your business to understand what the opportunity is, but also at the level of your customer to have a view to that well in advance so that they can plan accordingly for their own departments and their company. And then once a contract is 30 days past its expiration date, the opportunity to renew it is cut in half. And when that happens, 45% of the customers don't renew because they believe they weren't contacted. So what do we do to change it? So I want to just very briefly spend a moment on what is the opportunity for your business if you drink the Kool-Aid, as we say, and you adopt automation and you put a customer success program in place and you begin to build this practice. You have a greater understanding of the world around you. You will understand your customers' buying habits and their financial situation, which is key to being able to position your products and your offerings into the market. As important, sometimes more importantly, you'll understand your own corporate performance, and you'll be able to tie it to internal and external variables so that you can better plan your business model, your products, and your services that you're placing into the market. You'll be able to remove wasted or misused resources. That doesn't necessarily mean remove them from your environment, cutting people. It means reallocating your resources to items that maybe currently today you're not able to touch, which then leads to increased efficiency, increased revenue, and increased customer loyalty. So the opportunity is pretty clean, pretty easy. The question is, how do you get there? And what we hear every day, because we're in this business of solving the problem, is the challenges of the business for the future. Everybody wants to seize the opportunity, but there's always a challenge in front of you that you need to meet, open the door, and walk through it. So we touched on it earlier. Poor data quality is the primary reason that 40% of the initiatives that are starting are failing. So there's really 4 steps to the data that you need to understand as you move to automation and to customer success. The first is acquiring that data. Data collection and discovery is very cumbersome. You first need to identify what are the data points you need to successfully allow your teams to get your customers engaged in adopting, but then renewing and expanding within those customers? What do I need to know to be able to work through that process? And what are the tools for collecting that data? What we see and what statistically we hear in the industry is that most companies have to touch 7 to 10 different or disparate databases to prepare one renewal or recurring revenue proposal out to their end user. So that's very time consuming. And typically what you're pulling from each of those systems, all the data points aren't required. So again, what's the data I need? What are the tools I'm going to use to collect it? How do I manage it? In terms of what am I mining for? What are the analytics? You don't want to die. Death by analytics isn't good either. You need to be able to understand the top 3 to 5 that really bring meaningful information to your business. And then the top 2 to 5 that you can give to your customer that brings meaningful information to their business. And that comes in the form of a dashboard that you're able to get real-time information on. Then you need to understand that. You need to understand what it means to your business, how it's going to help it, and then how are you going to take action on it? Who's going to be responsible for that data in terms of ensuring that how it's going to help the business is being executed on and how you're measuring that success. All right, so that sets the premise. So now how do you make it happen? And we call it the three-legged stool, people, process, and technology. So automation is really critical, but automation is only one component, and without some people and some process behind it, you won't see the greatest benefit. So we'll start with the people. It's critical, key, I can't say it enough, that executives are involved and engaged in strategic discussions as you move forward into building a recurring services business. They need to be involved in the conversations of how they're differentiating programs and bringing greater value to the market, specifically with your recurring revenue offerings, specifically with any type of tools that you're going to offer to your customers. You know, the opportunity to automate your own business is great, but if you can then give your customers and your downline a clear view of their business and how it relates to you, it becomes even more powerful. What are the core competencies that you have that can remain in-house and that you don't have today and you can potentially outsource? Certainly process needs to remain in-house. Process needs to be crisp. Everybody needs to understand it. There needs to be clean handoffs. Software automation that drives this whole process we're discussing, and potentially people, are items that can both be outsourced if the in-house skills don't exist today. Who's going to be trained to handle the life cycle? So that's where we go back to, as John so eloquently set up in the beginning, your retainers, your expanders, your adopters. Who owns it? Is it the retainer? Is it the expander and they're expanding on the initial product or service that was placed? Or is it the people who have built the relationship with the customer, gotten them to adopt the technology, and then continue to expand it and retain it? That's a decision that is unique to each company. A lot of times one person crosses all three of those roles, but certainly you need to be engaged in understanding how that's going to happen. And then you have to ensure that you have a successful integration between whomever that identified resources and your sales, so sales and customer success. So once we move past people, we go into process. Process is pretty cut and dry. This is a very high level. Certainly there's a lot of workflow, there's a lot of handoff, there's a lot of tasks that happen when you design a process to run any business unit or model. But in terms of recurring revenue and establishing a practice, there's really two key components. One is the integration of renewal sales into your current sales process. It can't be totally isolated on an island. It's really critical that you give customer success training for your sales teams, and for your customer success teams, they receive sales training, specifically if you've divided the duties. And then the insight gets provided to both sides. So if customer success owns expanding, adopting, retaining, sales needs to be notified or aware of when they're working on those opportunities because they are the face to the customer, and vice versa. If sales is going out doing that, but there's a responsibility that lies in customer success, they need to understand what sales is positioning. And you want to train both sides on how to proactively upsell and cross-sell because you never know where the opportunity becomes apparent. Sales may be working on something, and if they're aware of at least how to position a renewal, they've gotten a notice, their retainer, in this case, has already reached out to them, they're working on procuring that renewal, they need to be able to help close that and speak to it, and vice versa. there's oftentimes the opportunity, specifically with adopters and expanders, that they're working within the account, and that opportunity to upsell is there, and they need to understand how to position it if they hear the inquiry come from your end user customer. So really key process on the people side. The other side is you have to know where your business stands at all time. How do you measure if all these things we're talking about are really working? Did the ROI pay off? So there's a couple of things you can measure, but the key components specifically for a business who's trying to measure their reoccurring business, days in advance for quotes. How many days in advance are you getting them out? Is that sufficient? You'll later look at the percent of contracts that were renewed prior to expiration and be able to determine what's the right number there. How do you move the dial to get the quotes at the right time? When renewals aren't completed, you want to understand why. Did you lose to a competitor? Are your quotes not going out soon enough? Is your pricing too high? Did you just have an end of life? Is the customer refreshing some type of technology? Really critical to understanding how to, again, turn the dial to change your business model, or at least what you're positioning in the market. Certainly customer retention rates are a great indicator of whether it's successful or not. Performance against your competitors. And then if you are a company who has a channel that you're using, you really want to understand the performance of your direct team versus your channel. And where there may be gaps, you need to understand how to fill them in and give both places, both channels out to the customer the opportunity to succeed at the highest levels. So we've worked through the process, and now we'll go to the technology. So this ties all the way back to the beginning, or the end of John's presentation and the beginning of mine, which is you need to automate all of that data. So we talk a lot about big data. You don't need to push out or use every data point that you pull. But as you're identifying your data, any data point that's significant, it needs to get automated. There's two places you automate. You automate externally and you automate internally. So externally is the process for transaction tracking. In other words, quote renewals, skewed part number renewals, the ability to push down notifications for upsell and cross-sell opportunities to customers, replacement notices, upgrade notices. All of that should be automated in a very friendly, both email and then login type of automated portal that gives a dashboard to your end user customers. So you're automating that process down through, from supplier down through channel partner, down ultimately to the end user. Automating it by email is great. If you can automate it with a portal that all the way through, depending on whom you are, you can come in and see that dashboard and see those notifications and build your own reports to plan your own business. That's really significant value that gets brought down to the market. You want to automate back up internally. So then you want to also be able to tie everything into your CRM, any quote tools that you have that are homegrown or you're providing to your channel, and finally back into your back-end accounting package if you're able to transact business down through the automation. So let's do last but not least. What's the technology look like? It looks like a portal, which I just touched on briefly. The portal allows for opportunity management at several levels of the business, but there's 4 key components that should happen through that portal that get automated in some form of process. One is simple proactive notifications to all future opportunity. Another is the ability to deliver quotes through a portal, manage the opportunity, deliver it for a current opportunity, and then be able to communicate back and forth in an environment where it's time and date stamped and everybody within the process, within your company, your channel if that's applicable, or your customer can see what's happening at any given time. You want the ability to do entitlement and registrations through an automated tool, and then performance metrics that basically completes the loop and feeds back what happened, how you forecast your business, what's selling, what's not, and those key 4 or 5 components we talked about a couple slides earlier. So what does it mean to your business? It means increased revenue streams, higher margins by an average of 10%, bottom line cost savings, increased business value again for shareholders and investors. Having that view out is critical. The ability to make better decisions because you understand what's happening internally and externally. And then better customer relationships with much higher levels of customer satisfaction and retention because you've brought everything together through the process, the people, and the technology. So I hope that sets up just a little bit better on why automation, but also that automation without the other parts and pieces is not the answer. You need all 3 pieces. So you need the customer success, you need the technology, and you need to have the process built behind it, all with some type of executive sponsorship. Last but not least, I just want to encourage everybody, Managed Maintenance will be out at the spring session. So we will be in the exhibit hall. If you have an opportunity, stop by. We can, automation is obviously our core competency. While we offer services, we can let you take a look at the software, talk to you about some of your best practices, have just kind of an informal conversation with my team or myself, and we look forward to seeing each of you there.
Great. Thank you so much, Tina, for a really insightful presentation. So we are moving into our Q&A session. I just want to encourage everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to include your questions into the questions panel. But our first question, Tina, is how quickly can an organization begin to see results from automation?
Okay, so and typically it's 90 days if you're using it to automate notifications of your renewals, if that's the capability you're looking for. Obviously, there's prep work to that. So before you can automate anything, you have to identify data points and pull together your processes. But once the automation is implemented, it's about 90 days.
Great, thank you. And Tina, can you also just briefly give some detail about what customer churn means?
So customer churn is that you're losing customers. While your number of customers may always remain, I'll just use a small number, 30. It's not the same 30. 30 should become 40. It shouldn't be 30, but 15 were 15 new ones, but you lost 15. It's very expensive to maintain customer churn because you're in constant customer procurement to keep your numbers steady, not growing, and that's a very expensive model.
Great, thank you. And our last question is, what key performance indicators do you recommend for tracking the health of your services/renewal business outside of profit and revenue?
Well, so we touched on them a little bit earlier, but obviously renewal rates are a critical component. You need to understand how much is renewing. But I think what's as important is why is it renewing or why is it not renewing? Because that's how you're going to begin to make the adjustments. And some of the metrics we talked about earlier help you start to understand and answer that question. So how many days is it typically that, is the right time that a quote goes out? At what point do you see that highest renewal rate? And having a system that allows when somebody chooses not to renew to provide you information in a very non-threatening environment, even if it's clicking a button and saying, it's out of production, I refreshed it, I'm buying from a competitor. It's really critical to be able to take your business and make the shift that's necessary.
Great, thank you so much, Tina. We do have a couple of minutes left. Tina and John, did you want to leave any last-minute thoughts with our attendees today before we wrap up?
Well, this is John. I'll jump in. As I said, we're kicking off the annual technology survey. It will be open all the month of March. This is open to anybody in service, whether you're a TSIA member or not. We've been adding some technology categories, specifically around revenue recognition, consumption monitoring, and analytics. Look for that survey when it comes out, understanding what tools you're using, how satisfied they are with them, and where you're planning incremental spending on these tools is incredibly helpful for our planning and for our research.
Perfect. I would just reiterate that we hope to see everybody in the spring, and find us either in the exhibit hall or at our website, and let's have a conversation. We're happy to just give you 15 minutes on the phone as TSI members and kind of talk through any questions you might have that you don't want to ask here or requires just a little bit more information.
Great, thank you, Tina. So we are coming to the conclusion of today's webinar. I would like to take this time to thank John and Tina for a very insightful and informative session today. And just want to remind everyone that a link to today's recording and the PDF of the presentation will be emailed out in the next 24 hours. So be on the lookout for that. Again, thank you very much for taking time to join us on today's webinar sponsored by Managed Maintenance. And we hope to see you at our next TSA webinar very soon. Have a great day, everyone.